Eisha Marjara. I'm a filmmaker from Montreal. I started out in photography. I studied photography with the intention of working and moving my way eventually into filmmaking. I was uncomfortable and unsatisfied with the single frame, single perspective limitations of the form. My tendency was to pack in as much content in the single frame as I could. And I was tending more towards producing experimental type of photography and trying to tell a more complex and inclusive story, because it was just more fun and more exciting, and it invited me to many more possibilities of getting through the real narrow and constricted passages of reality.
याद करो जब तुम कुछ भी नहीं थे, सिर्फ एक मामूली स्टेज आर्टिस्ट। तुम्हारी टैलेंट को बढ़ाने और दिखाने में मैंने तुम्हारी मदद की। उस वक्त तुम भी मुझसे बहुत प्यार करती थी, मगर आज तुमने 4 पैसे क्या कमा लिए, तुम ये भी भूल गई कि कोई तुमसे प्यार करता है।
ये फिल्मी डायलॉग सुनाने की कोई जरूरत नहीं।
ये फिल्मी डायलॉग नहीं, सच्चाई है।
This school, called The Star Maker, gives actors a chance to make their dreams a reality by becoming everyone else's fantasy.
It was inevitable I would be eventually making movies. You know, whatever medium I choose, especially with filmmaking, it's such a heavy medium that includes a lot of creative collaborators. One can get really lost in the message that they're trying to tell.
What the hell was I doing here?
But I love it because of its artifice. That is the only way that I can arrive at some sort of truth.
I didn't know what to think. Is that for real? Was that really Julia? In just a fraction of a second, the image of Lynn with Eric came back to me like the rerun of a bad home movie.
One of my first films was a film called The Incredible Shrinking Woman, and it was a sort of satirical take on anorexia, and framed within a film noir narrative that I wrote. That sort of undercuts gender stereotypes and sexism and all that.
You've got to help me, Doctor. I can't stop myself from shrinking. I'm afraid I might disappear.
And how do you make yourself shrink?
Well, I think small.
You think small?
Yes, I think small, but in a big kind of way. You know, less is more. Let me explain.
I made a film at the NFB called Desperately Seeking Helen. It's a feature docudrama. I'm not sure how to classify it. It's a film about my mother. I lost my mother and my little sister in the Air India tragedy. The film was not intended to be about the Air India event. It was a film, it was kind of a coming-of-age story, a faux or half-faux autobiographical, semi-autobiographical story in which me, the filmmaker, goes to Mumbai to search for Helen, a Bollywood movie star.
I can't stop looking because I worry that Helen will walk past me when I am not looking. Now, Was that Helen? I must be dreaming.
So I made this film as a way to explore my relationship with my mother and to give her a story and to give her a voice and make meaning of her life as a South Asian immigrant housewife who came to Canada with a lot of hope and desire and ambition, trying to make meaning of her life and her death. I sort of frame the film, how do I frame the film? I frame the film within many frames so that it's unframeable. It's kind of a postmodern approach to the documentary form. I explore the personal story through the popular lens, and I explore the popular culture through the personal perspective.
My mother told me I was born on a hot spring day. The second of 3 daughters, I was not an easy birth. Everyone was expecting a boy. Mom said that it didn't matter, but I think it did. My mother was only 20 when she married Dad, whom she first met on their wedding day in a city called Amritsar. She was a school teacher and he was a professor and destined for life abroad.
The Air India tragedy had to be explored and expressed and represented in the film. And that came while I was making the movie. It's not something that was the focus of the film, but it is a very evocative and a very powerful part of the movie nonetheless. And it does take up a lot of space emotionally.
वो आ गया, देखो, देखो वो आ गया।
I was shooting macro shots, extreme close-ups of the personal effects that were worn on my mother and my sister when they died. And these personal effects were like a watch, necklaces, earrings that were left on their body and were shipped to my family in envelopes. That project, which I call Remember Me Nought, was conceived from those images. And those images are very, very dramatic. When you look at anything in extreme close-up, you are kind of invited into a different world. Different stories are told through that perspective. And it wasn't the story I wanted to hold on to. I wanted to add my own remembrance and my own memory of my mother and my sister. And so I did a photo montage, which includes those effects and my memory of my history, of my family. So that was the way that I chose to frame that history for myself. The photos were published in a journal which is no longer in publication called Descant. The story editor asked me to write something to accompany the photographs. And I thought that was going to be very boring to just write something descriptive. I had this idea. Why don't I write a letter to my mother and sister? And they got on a plane, they went to the airport, they got on a plane, and boom, they're just hanging around in, the other world, trying to figure out 30 years later what the heck happened. So no one ever clued them in. We're like trying to figure things out here. And so I thought, that would be kind of powerful if I wrote this letter to them explaining what happened. I'm currently working on developing a feature film called Calorie. Calorie came about with a question and a curiosity I had. I wanted to look at the Air India tragedy from a contemporary perspective. I was curious about how kids growing up today who have not lived through it and have very little connection with it, what they know about the event, what connection they have, what stories they tell themselves of the tragedy. So it's an intergenerational story of women, a grandmother, mother, and her daughters who go to India for the summer and discover and unravel the tangled web of this history.
In 1971, January and winter, the family moved from Amritsar to Quebec. We arrived there and we never turned back.
फिल्मफेयर फेमिना मैडम फिल्मफेयर दूँ फेमिना है फिल्मफेयर है नया लेटेस्ट है मैडम स्पेशल इशू है और ये फिल्मफेयर है मैडम स्पेशल इशू है नया लेटेस्ट है आज ही है मैडम.
The latest issue of Filmfare opens to an ad which reads, "The days of black and white are over." But are they really?